I wonder this massive increase in defense allocation and the numbers, we'll get more granular details. Very, very clearly, defense becoming the priority, Rajdeep, at this.
It's not such a big increase over the last year's number. I mean, 6.2 lakh crore is okay, but in sense of the, I mean, I don't have the exact percentage, but over last year, it's not more than any, I think, not more than 10%.
Rajdeep,
Yes.
The biggest watched component in the defense is the defense capital outlay.
Yeah.
What you spend on the aircrafts and the guns and other kind of thing, right? For the current year, it was 1,62,000 crores. In revised estimates, this has been actually reduced to 1,57,000 crores.
2324.
Now you have some numbers that you want to give.
So
But these are, of course, pre what, these are pre today's budget.
I'm giving you the budget numbers now.
Right.
So there is a minor 5 lakh crore, 5,000 crores of reduction in the defense budget.
So it's gone up from 5.94 at the aggregate level in the existing financial year. The allocation is at 6.1. Capital is 1.63 lakh crore. Just to add to what
Prime Minister Modi is speaking at this time. Let's listen in.
कंटिन्यूटी का कॉन्फिडेंस है. ये बजट विकसित भारत के 4 स्तंभ युवा, गरीब, महिला और किसान सभी को एम्पावर करेगा. निर्मला जी का ये बजट देश के भविष्य के निर्माण का बजट है. इस बजट में मजबूत करने की गारंटी है. मैं निर्मला जी और उनकी टीम को बहुत बहुत बधाई देता हूं. साथियों, इस बजट में युवा भारत की युवा आकांक्षाओं का, भारत की यंग एस्पिरेशंस का प्रतिबिंब है. बजट में 2 महत्वपूर्ण निर्णय लिए गए हैं. रिसर्च और इनोवेशन पर 1 लाख करोड़ रुपए का फंड बनाने की घोषणा की गई है. बजट में स्टार्टअप्स को मिलने वाली टैक्स छूट के विस्तार का भी ऐलान किया गया है. साथियों, इस बजट में फिस्कल डेफिसिट को नियंत्रण में रखते हुए कैपिटल एक्सपेंडिचर को 11,11,111 करोड़ रुपए की ऐतिहासिक ऊंचाई दी गई है. अर्थशास्त्रियों की भाषा में कहें तो एक प्रकार से स्वीट स्पॉट है. इससे भारत में 21वीं सदी के आधुनिक इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर के निर्माण के साथ ही युवाओं के लिए अनगिनत रोजगार के नए अवसर तैयार होंगे. बजट में वंदे भारत स्टैंडर्ड की 40,000 आधुनिक बोगियां बनाकर उन्हें सामान्य यात्री ट्रेनों में लगाने का ऐलान किया गया है. इससे देश के अलग अलग रेल रूट पर करोड़ों यात्रियों में आरामदायक यात्रा का अनुभव बढ़ेगा. साथियों, हम एक बड़ा लक्ष्य तय करते हैं, उसे प्राप्त करते हैं और फिर उससे भी बड़ा लक्ष्य अपने लिए तय करते हैं. गरीबों के लिए हमने गांवों और शहरों में 4 करोड़ से अधिक घर बनाए. अब हमने 2 करोड़ और नए घर बनाने का लक्ष्य रखा है. हमने 2 करोड़ महिलाओं को लखपति दीदी बनाने का लक्ष्य रखा था. अब इस लक्ष्य को बढ़ाकर 3 करोड़ लखपति दीदी बनाने का कर दिया गया है. आयुष्मान भारत योजना ने गरीबों की बहुत मदद की है. अब आंगनवाड़ी और आशा वर्कर, उन सबको इस योजना का लाभ मिलेगा. साथियों, इस बजट में गरीब और मध्यम वर्ग को एम्पावर करने, उनके लिए आय के नए अवसर बनाने पर भी बहुत जोर दिया गया है। रूफटॉप सोलर अभियान में 1 करोड़ परिवारों को सोलर रूफटॉप के माध्यम से मुफ्त बिजली प्राप्त होगी। इतना ही नहीं, सरकार को अतिरिक्त बिजली बेचकर लोगों को 15 से 20 हजार प्रति वर्ष की आय भी होगी और ये हर परिवार को होगी। साथियों, आज जिस इनकम टैक्स रेमिशन स्कीम की घोषणा की गई है, उससे मध्यम वर्ग के करीब 1 करोड़ लोगों को बड़ी राहत मिलेगी। पिछली सरकारों ने सामान्य मानवी के सिर पर दशकों से ये बहुत बड़ी तलवार लटका कर रखी थी। आज इस बजट में किसानों के लिए भी बहुत महत्वपूर्ण और बड़े निर्णय लिए गए हैं। नैनो डीएपी का उपयोग हो, पशुओं के लिए नई योजना हो, पीएम मत्स्य संपदा योजना का विस्तार हो और आत्मनिर्भर ऑयल सीड अभियान हो। इससे किसानों की आय बढ़ेगी और खर्च कम होगा। मैं एक बार फिर सभी देशवासियों को इस ऐतिहासिक बजट के लिए शुभकामनाएं देता हूं। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
Okay, remember, the word that the Prime Minister has been using repeatedly is Gyan. Garib, youth, Annadata, Nyay. You can add the word middle class. The middle class word was used a few times in that short intervention that the Prime Minister made. But the clear focus at the moment, Siddharth, is on this Gyan factor. Garib, youth, Annadata, Nyay. The Prime Minister very good at acronyms. New acronyms that have come up today that I saw. FDI, First Develop India, used by Nirmala Sitharaman. And GDP, Government Development and Performance. But overall, what is there for the middle class? The Prime Minister mentioned middle class 3 or 4 times. Yes, there's the Housing for All project that he wants to push forward. But your sense, did you see anything specific that should give the middle class some reason to cheer?
I don't think the government is linking it to the budget, and very clearly the difference between 2019 and 2024 is the much better, stronger tailwinds that the government has in political terms, and that reflecting in the confidence with which some of these expectations have not been dealt with currently, Rajdeep. Will it be done in July? I don't know the answer to that. And just one quick point, if tax cuts have not happened now, is there economic logic to do it in the first year of a new government? So we don't know the answer to that. But one thing is clear, one more massive plan and ambition will be outlined in the Viksit Bharat roadmap that will be announced sometime in the near future.
You mean in the next month before the code of conduct comes into place?
I don't think so. I have no indications to that. I certainly believe it will perhaps be post the budget, or some elements of that may be in the budget. I don't think it's linked to the elections at all.
I don't think Viksit Bharat roadmap will come before the
next elections. Yeah. Before the elections are over.
Remember, in 2019, the government had laid down a 10-dimensional vision for India 2035, including mentioning that 10 trillion. This time they have avoided mentioning either any specific target or any specific vision or the roadmap. Let it be left for the future.
Let's go for a moment to Niranjan Hiranandani, Managing Director of Hiranandani Group, one of the country's largest real estate groups. They are now diversifying, of course, but there was the mention about housing for all. That's seen as one of the great slogans, the catchy slogans of this government, and the possibility of providing urban housing to more and more people who live in rented houses today. Your sense, is there that capacity there in the sector to be able to realize this vision of housing for all?
Rajdeep, thank you for having me. Let me share with you. I was a part of the program which prepared for the PMAY scheme. And at that point of time, the estimates which were created for urban and rural housing was 30 million. and they made a program for 30 million, 3 crore houses, and they have almost fulfilled that target by 95% or 97%. Now, if that target was not correct, obviously they couldn't have done more. And now they have realized that as far as housing is concerned, we still need a long way to go before we really complete the requirements in the marketplace. So I think what they have done now is to prepare the program for 2 crore houses, which will take care of the middle and the lower middle class, which they are talking about, which is the affordable segment where we are getting the subsidies. They haven't come up yet with two parts, which is actually the slum rehabilitation, which had been talked about earlier, and also for the rental housing, which I think they will come about in the next budget, because the discussion paper on that was issued by the Housing Ministry. So I think these two aspects of it we will likely to see in the budget which is there. But I think this is a directional budget. And in that, quite a lot is being said as far as housing is concerned. But second point, which is more important, I think, as far as housing is concerned, is the infrastructure which is coming up. And if you look at Mumbai alone, you are going to have 300 kilometers of metro, you have the MTHL corridor, you're getting so much land to be developed. So I think housing is going to see a big uplift in the next 5 years, much more than I could have ever dreamt of. So I am looking very positively, both in the affordable segment as well as in the luxury segment. Luxury segment has seen a growth which is also unpredicted by anybody in the housing sector, which is already seeing, and you can see that reflection as far as the growth is concerned, even in the listed companies of things. So I think all in all, housing is going to do it. They've focused on roti, they're focused on agriculture. I think textiles are also doing extremely well. So the essential needs of the people are being taken care of. And I think that is very, very, very clear in the finance minister's thing, whether and what is reaching to the poorest of poor in terms of the social requirements of the people, I think is very well clarified. So while you look at a Viksit Bharat of a developed country, I think she has made it very clear that the social commitment to the poorest of poor in every segment is going to do. So economy on one side, housing, of course, a part of that, but also the fact that social thing will be taken care of. I think that's very clear, Rajdeep. I don't see any any doubt about that part. It's a good budget, directional budget.
Okay. Siddharth, you have a guest.
Deepak Shetty, Chairman of CII Infrastructure Council, is also with us. Deepak, welcome. Very clearly, there is a significant announcement for the housing sector, and the housing sector is a driver of so many other sectors in the economy. What's your own sense about how this new housing scheme for the middle class could pan out, and what kind of opportunities could it create for your sector?
I think it's very heartening. First of all, at the top level also, if you see, the direction, the focus on infrastructure development continues, and that is what this 11.1 lakh crore investment, that's the message that we get. But specifically answering your question, I think it's very positive that the focus is there on housing sector. This is again going to help develop the infrastructure. It's not only about creating houses, cleaning up the groundwork, and then also laying the roads, etc., to connect these hamlets where the housing will be developed. I'm sure this will further help spruce up the rural economy. So from infrastructure development, I think the various elements have been covered. And if I expand this a bit, normally when we talk about infrastructure development, we think roads, highways, airports. But the Honorable Finance Minister has also spoken about investment into the railway sector. Now, again, very, very important. I want to touch one more element, is the logistics cost in India is like around 12 to 13%. I'm sure with a more dedicated freight corridors, with better connectivity, the overall logistics also will come down, which will further help benefit the economy and the industry.
Mr. Shetty, do you see a timeline for these 2 crore houses to be added? As Mr. Hiranandani said, this budget is primarily directional, that housing is seen as a key priority for the government, but do you see a timeline?
No, I agree with Mr. Hiranandani. I think this is more of a directional budget. It talks about what the government is looking at. I'm sure as we move forward, particularly maybe in the month of July, we will see more more of those elements where the timelines will be mentioned. But again, for the industry, it is very heartening that the government is looking at this important sector.
All right. Niranjan Hiranandani, yeah, you wanted to make a point. Go ahead, Niranjan.
Yeah, the estimates which were first put out by the ministry was talking about a target of 2 million houses to be done in 5 years' time. So probably the PMAY scheme will look at 2 crore houses. The breakup of urban and rural has not been mentioned, but I think that will also come out in detail because those estimates were being prepared both for the urban and rural areas. We do think that at least 5 years' time is the target, which is aggressive, but I think they will be able to achieve it because they have already got the previous experience of PMAY scheme. We have asked, and the industry has asked for certain modifications in the rules and regulations for the purposes of getting the benefit of it, because cities like Mumbai and others, where they had put a top line in terms of the price of the brand, could not get the benefit of this PMAY scheme. And that's why some recommendations from the associations have come up.
Rajdeep, one of the things that we need to take note of, and Saurav, you can also jump in on this, is what is considered affordable in the other parts of the country is not affordable at all in Mumbai. But the key recognition behind this announcement could be the fact that affordable housing as a segment for the upwardly mobile set of people moving from rural India into our cities for jobs and for growth, they are finding affordable housing extremely difficult, extremely expensive. Post-COVID, that trend has accentuated where you are seeing premium luxury housing projects being announced. The newspapers are full of ads all the time, whereas that segment has suffered. So in some ways, this is also smart politics, Rajdeep, where that growing, the middle bellies, really to say, in our large urban conglomerations does not have access to good housing. Apna ghar, अपने पैसे का घर, अपने सर पे छत जो अपना कमाया हुआ हो, that is missing, and this again will feed into a certain kind of sentiment. And I constantly see that there is smart politics behind such announcements and decisions being taken.
Saurabh?
No, you're absolutely right. I think the affordable housing problem was a real one, and I think this scheme is directly aimed at trying to assuage some part of that, because as you know, people who are in the housing segment, and Mr. Hiranandani will be very, obviously he knows much better than many of us, is that there is a huge gap in affordable housing. And just like you pointed out, the whole focus has been on premium housing, newer projects. But the affordable housing, particularly for the migration, the population which comes from the semi-urban areas into urban as the workforce moves, is very, very important. However, I want to also bring on the table one other issue which we have not yet discussed, Rajdeep, which is the issue of disinvestment, the disinvestment target of 50,000 crore. What is, Mr. Garg, would you like to come in on that? What is your sense of whether this is achievable given the kind of performance which we've seen over the last couple of years?
So, two things. Number one, the disinvestment target for the current year has been reduced to 30,000.
Yes.
And for the next year, it has been capped at 50,000. My sense is that the government has literally given up on the privatization and disinvestment. These lowly targets, at one point a year, this was capped at 2.1 lakh crore or something. Correct. Today we are talking about 30,000 crore or something. On the contrary, the investment in public sector undertakings is going up sharply.
Mr. Garg, I want to interrupt you here because I have followed up this point with successors of yours in the finance ministry, and one thing they tell us, where is the pipeline? How much can you disinvest? And please also look at dividends as part of the overall proceeds. You know the switch that happened earlier. Disinvestment as sale proceeds would be different from annual surpluses that were given. But the key point here is the IDBI sale. What is your sense? Is the FY25 higher target on account of the belief that the government may manage to privatize IDBI just as India?
So the first question, that where is the pipeline or where is the space? All your banks which are doing so well have government equity from 80 to 90%. You can disinvest enormous amount in your banking sector, barring SBI, which has about, I think, 56, 57%.
So can this be done? Because, the banking privatization is 30 decades.
It can be done. It was supposed to be done. and it should be done.
But why is it not being done? That's the key
point
question.
about disinvestment, we've seen this over the years. It's the ball that's always kicked forward in the hope that the next government, the next budget will take.
This is where, having seen it at close quarters, I admire the strength of the Indian bureaucracy. And Subhash may
Strength or the resilience?
Resilience or etc. See, the public, in other words, in my older days, I used to call this as state capitalism. And there's a feature of state capitalism versus private capitalism. And state capitalism trumps for various reasons, for many reasons. And I think this will continue. But the fact is that it should be done. And, and I can say it now, is that in my view, the merger of the banks as compared to the privatization of those banks has done much less benefit than what the privatization would have done.
Yes, Mr. Majumdar. No, one by one. Yes, sir.
Kumar, I just wanted to tell you, given the track record even of this year, this fiscal and the reduction of do you think it can be done? The 50,000 crore also looks like a steep one. The other point I'm making is, can you really, you've missed many market opportunities when the market was at its peak. This is all about timing the market, right? You can't really time the market is what everybody knows. So, but, you've missed out on a lot of opportunities which you could have done.
I completely agree, but the point is that I've already admitted to the fact that state capitalism trumps.
Okay, state capitalism trumps. As a former bureaucrat, you agree that the bureaucrats beyond a point are not going to accept unleashing these energies.
I entirely agree. The bureaucracy and the politicians both are by their nature against the privatization. If you want to see this clearly demonstrated, go to the Power Ministry stocks. Power Ministry has one of the best public sector entities to disinvest and sell. What happened to PFC buying REC? What happened to two other companies which were bought by NTPC? No one wants privatization. Now, privatization is still difficult because you're leaving the asset into the private hands. Disinvestment is not leaving the asset. So there, by the way, now the public sector companies' market cap is over 70 lakh crores. 50,000 crore is not even 1% of that.
Exactly.
So this is sheer, I think, disinterest and completely giving up.
Let me just stop you for a moment because Siddharth has another guest joining us. Sanjeev Bajaj, Chairman and Managing Director, Bajaj FinServ, joins us. Siddharth.
Sanjeev, welcome to India today. Your key takeaway, solid, no controversies, no shocks, no surprises, and the best possible outcome in an interim budget in recent memory. Sanjeev, is that how you would read it?
So I was enjoying hearing the conversation prior to me joining, but yes, I look at this as a balanced budget, keeping in mind that it's a vote on account. It continues on the public sector capex spends, and as we can see, I think that's higher by about 11% or so. It is a socially inclusive budget. We know that's important for a country like India, and it's something that this current government has been pursuing as well. And at the same time, the government is showing that they are following the fiscal prudence path that they laid out a few years ago. I don't think you can ask for more at this point of time. Of course, the next budget that comes up with the new government, we hope for that to lay out the path, as I think both the Prime Minister mentioned and the FM prior to that, in line with the goal towards Amrit Kal. I hope we will see some significant more announcements at that time.
Will the burden continue to be on the government when it comes to infrastructure development and so many other areas? Because the question in government that is asked and sometimes not said publicly is, where is the private sector? Why is it not coming forward now that the big banking cleanup has also been done by the Modi government?
So that's a very fair question. Governments cannot keep funding capex for a large and one with the kind of opportunity that India has. And yet there are moments in time where for multiple factors, the private sector is not able to come up to speed. And we have seen the external uncertainties that we are facing, even and continue to face. Look at where the rest of the globe is. Look at what happened from the pandemic and just the amount of time it takes to get back to speed. End of the day, private sector will invest when there is sufficient demand and capacity utilization has taken place, because eventually that capital that we raise, we have to go and pay that back as well. Government has greater leeway. And I must say this government has taken the bull by its horn and said that, yes, we will step in when required. We are already starting to see some signs, some of the early sectors, basic raw materials, we are seeing in housing, construction, we are seeing capex, good production. Some of these sectors which are used by other industries to propel their growth. We are seeing new investment in the last 4 to 6 quarters coming there. And I'm hopeful that as our economy continues to chug along at the current pace, and we do not see any significant negatives externally, that you will, in the next 4 to 6 quarters, start seeing more and more industries announce their own private new capex.
But do you see domestic demand also growing? I mean, this has been a question over the last few years. Earlier, it was suggested because of COVID, demand was subdued. But we are now 2 years out of COVID, and there is still no dramatic rise, Sanjeev, in demand. So, what is it that's going to trigger greater domestic demand and consumption?
Post-COVID, the initial spurt in demand we saw was because of the kind of money that came into people's hands, what the government did and the benefits towards that. We then saw some amount of slowing in that demand, and this is because overall growth was still not moving. Now, on the back of 3 years of very strong capex on the public side, we can see a multiplier effect start to happen more so in urban India when it comes to growth. Rural India is still soft at this point of time. The last monsoon was not great. Plus, I believe that a lot of the subsidies that were increased during the COVID period, as those have been brought down understandably, it has taken some money away from people's hands. So yes, so let's hope that we have another good monsoon. That is important for us. And as I mentioned, if our external situation remains reasonably controlled, I can't say it's suddenly going to disappear, but if it does, I think you will start seeing demand, especially on the consumer side initially, start off in India. And that's very important. We need more jobs because those jobs are then going to create demand for the future.
Saurav here, just to add to what you're saying, there is a view also that given the global headwinds, the uncertainties in the global market for Indian corporates, and the fact that, like you just mentioned, rural demand still continues to be soft. Do you see the government having to continue for another couple of years or about 2 or 3 years this whole heavy lifting of public capital expenditure?
It's very difficult to say that because, I can also see as a concern for the government, their interest payments is now nearly, 39% of their receipts. So that's not a position that they would want to be for a long period of time as well. So really what you're asking me to do is to look into a crystal ball and tell you what the economy is going to look like going forward. I think at this point of time, it's anybody's guess. I cannot say that I can see a clear path ahead that's a 8% growth path.
I would tell you that if the interest rates come down by 1.5%, the affordable housing growth will shift from 2% growth to 10 to 12% growth. So actually the affordable housing sector is...
I don't know, that's an excellent point, and Mr. Rajiv Kumar here said not happening. But Sanjeev, the question to you, has the government's announcement today created the circumstances for the Reserve Bank of India to start perhaps earlier than expected a reversal of the interest rate hike cycle? Will interest rates and the cost of money for housing, for example, go down?
One, I do believe, and as we can see also in the last couple of months, that rates seem to have peaked. You have to say because the situation still continues to be uncertain externally. Second, Fed has, as you know, held rates. There is a significant expectation of rate cuts in the US through 24. So it's a matter of when rather than if. And yes, with today's announcement on the greater fiscal prudence, a path that the government, the FMA chalked out 3 years ago, it will create greater confidence. What happens next week, we'll have to wait and watch.
Has North Block created better circumstances for Mint Street next week? The point that Sanjeev is...
In my sense, the RBI's interest rate policy was not really too much dependent or guided by the fiscal deficit. It was more about the situation in the economy in general. And since the inflation is what they target, though in my judgment, the inflation in India is primarily on the food and agricultural side, not the real core inflation. So they had guided that, that was what was guiding. So the reduction in fiscal deficit to 5.1% for the next year is not going to be a very material factor. What is the larger factor which is being hinted? There is a global downturn trend in inflation, and accordingly the Fed and other will start declining or reducing the interest rate now. And in our situation also, maybe couple of months down the line, we will see the reduction. But incidentally, that has a very poor effect on the banking stocks, because today the housing interest rate is all linked to virtually the repo rate. So if repo rate goes down, the housing rate goes down, and the margins of the bank squeeze.
But the overall impact of a lower interest rate, and therefore a spur or therefore a boost to the housing sector, is very good for the economy, because the housing has a huge number of backward linkages. And I think, therefore, I wish what Mr. Hiranandani was saying will happen, but I don't see a 150 basis point reduction in interest rates. Maximum, I would say in year 24, about 75 basis points reduction in interest rates going forward.
Can I though just ask the risk factor, because those in industry are often reluctant to look at potential risks ahead, but especially on budget day. Sanjeev, you're still with us. Do you see any major risk factors going ahead in the next 4 months? It appears at the moment, speaking to those in corporate India and industry, they've discounted the 2024 elections. They too seem to believe that the Modi government is in pole position to get re-elected. But are there other risk factors there? Is there a sense that that could change things between now and July, since July seems to be the next big date?
Other than the political risk, I think just the risk of an escalation in war, the risk and the impact on that. Let's keep in mind, last couple of years, our oil prices, and as a result of that, our inflation has stayed in good control. It's also declined on the CPI side, as we can see. So to me, that can be a risk if externalities go out of hand. Second is that, yes, if we see uncertainty, and at some point of time, the government cannot continue to keep funding our own growth. Private sector has to step in. And for the reasons we all understand, the private sector, you have to respect capital. So private sector will step in only when they see a reasonable amount of certainty. So to me, these are associated risks which are real. It's at the back of our mind. I don't see them as very high risks at this point of time, but they do exist.
So, in my judgment, political risk may not be that, but the real risk to their profitability in the corporate sector is the capex. There is a 50,000 rupees reduction in the current year's capex from 10 to about 9.5, and the next year's growth is also smaller than what it is expected. If that doesn't get delivered, if there is a reduction in the capex going forward for whatever reason, that to my mind is a bigger risk to the corporate profitability.
But interesting, Siddharth, and this is been the major takeaway from today's budget, is the sense of confidence that the government seems to have of re-election. We've been comparing it to 2019 and the period between February and May of 2019. Do you believe that at least over the next 4 or 5 months, people will wait to see what happens in May, irrespective of this seeming inevitability that of a re-election, and then take their choices post that, wait to see what happens in the July budget? This will be a pause period. A number of big ticket projects will be on pause mode.
Just as our general budgets have become lesser in the overall framework and size and scale of the Indian economy, I think budgets and their relevance politically has also decreased. Look at this government's decision-making strategy. There was an import duty cut that had to be done, was done 24 hours before budget. So budgets' relative importance in that sense is different. Of course, it is as the government of India's balance sheet grows, the numbers will become bigger, debate will have to exist. But the broader point, Rajdeep, as far as the politics and the comparison with 2019 is concerned, the Sea Water Consumer Survey, one of the most startling points there, and that was featured all across our group since yesterday, is the fact that despite the pain of inflation, optimism remains and trust on Prime Minister Modi and his guarantees, implicit and otherwise, remains at the highest level. And if you were to compare this interim budget with interim budget announcements during, for example, Finance Minister P. Chidambaram's era, you will see that credibility is at the core of this. There is no wool over the eyes statements or announcements.
Are you saying Mr. Chidambaram had no credibility? Siddharth Zarabi is saying that when Chidambaram would make announcements, I think his 2014 was
politically. They were targeted politically. That's the point I'm trying to make. There was a clear political target. I'm not saying that he was not a credible person.
No, so
That's
was Piyush Goyal in 2019.
Well,
right?
yes, but 2019, the political context was different. That's the point, Rajdeep. But let me toss it back to you. You track this better than the best. What is the Hawa right now versus 2019?
No, I keep maintaining the big difference between 2019 and 2024 is that unlike 2019, where there was a sense that the opposition had a fair chance, there's a general belief that this is a done deal. I mean, it's a word I hate to use because at the end of the day, there's, Janta Janardhan. This is a country of 1.4 billion people. Who knows what the voter may think come tomorrow. As of today, there's a sense that it's a done deal. And that seems to reflect in the way this, the budget was delivered. The general belief that let's not, if it ain't broke, don't fix, you don't need to do anything dramatic. That, to my mind, has driven the overall sense of this government.
Rahul Kamal said this, and I added another D to it. Davos, the mood on India was fantastic, fastest growing.
Davos is not a general election. This Davos factor has to stop.
Let me add to that. And then he said, from Davos to devotion, covering the Ram temple Pran Pratishtha. And today when we cover the deficit that the Modi government, the roadmap that is unveiled, there are 3 Ds, Davos, devotion and deficit, and the government scoring and India scoring very highly on all 3.
Okay, but you're learning from the Modi way of doing things, telling us the 3 Ds. But Davos doesn't decide a general election. They might like to believe that they can decide what happens in a general election. Neither do the men in suits decide general elections in this country.
Every foreign investor that I spoke with had only good words to say on record, and I know you'll ask me even off record, Rajdeep. So there is clearly no doubt that as far as the world is concerned, they expect and they want a 3rd term for Prime Minister Narendra Modi. No doubt on it at all.
Okay, so, and it's interesting, you see the political resonance that Mr. Modi brings into budget speeches. Lakshadweep, for example. To specifically mention it, give a sort of pump up to his own visit to Lakshadweep a few weeks ago and say that it's going to become a tourist hub. That is, I believe...
Are you saying that it was a poke in the eye towards another island?
No. You see whether it is that we are going to focus on the eastern part of the country. That will resonate possibly in newspapers tomorrow or in channels in the east of the country, which is a potential growth area for the government because they maxed out in northwest and central India. When you speak of Lakshadweep, you're sending out a message that, look, I've gone there and this was not just a tourist photo op. I want to sort of build a tourist infrastructure around Lakshadweep. The idea that you use every photo, every image, every message to create a sense that we are moving ahead.
Why isn't it simply a development announcement? Lakshadweep needs development. Lakshadweep needs tourist facilities. Its infrastructure is underdeveloped.
Yes.
I mean, it's just simple as that. So why bring in politics in everything that you can see? I mean,
No, in the sense
I told you about...
No, in the sense that Lakshadweep has probably come into a budget speech for the first time.
Well, that's
it's
good.
Come in a few weeks. It's come in a few weeks after the Prime Minister went. So to build these connects.
And even the eastern region, as I explained to you earlier, that's where the concentration of the is. That's where all the migrants are coming from. If they get development and jobs are generated there, I think it's better on all accounts.
I agree. Saurabh, what's your biggest takeaway when you sort of look at this budget, interim budget, particularly compared to 2019? Is that the sense you get, a more self-confident government in a better place, a sweeter spot than it was 5 years ago?
Clearly, as I said earlier, Rajdeep, the economy, as the government sees it for surely, is in a sweet spot. So they feel that they are well positioned to lay out a roadmap for the future. And it's not even a roadmap, it is basically a statement of intent. The roadmap will come as they seem to be confident about in the next term, and in the first budget of the next term, which is in July. So it is, in a sense, in their minds, of course, it's a done deal. They do believe that it's a continuum in that sense. So whether it is 2019 and 2024, and then after the elections, it is a continuing, and you know, it's important in that sense.
Can I just throw one word? The word count, and you know, India Today has been doing that. This is, of course, the Prime Minister 42 times, tax 42 times, policy 35 times, government 26, Bharat 24, scheme 16, farmer 15, opportunity 13, economy 12, reforms 12, women 11, GST 11, growth 10, states 10, vaccine 6, airport 6, IIT 5, Atmanirbhar Bharat 4, fish 4, inflation 3, Awas Yojana 3, Lakshadweep twice, Ram Mandir twice, Vande Bharat twice. 2 words, according to some, conspicuously missing this time: jobs and employment.
But Prime Minister, Prime
Minister 42 times.
Rajdeep, I just have quick some numbers that you asked me about Chidambaram. 2014, 35,000 crore off the line, below the table, outside the budget, oil marketing and fertilizer subsidy. Plan expenditure reduced by 80,000, delayed payments of 8,000 crore plus to infrastructure companies, all to shore up the deficit. That credibility, or the lack of it from then to 10 years of Modinomics, I think there can be no argument against that. This government, whenever it gives the numbers, Mr. Garg may point out certain actual revised expenditure estimates and some tinkering within the schemes, but the big picture clearly is in favor of Modinomics.
Okay, I have to end the show because my producer says we have to have some advertising also. Since we've had non-stop coverage without any ad breaks, but I appreciate all of you joining us. That's a debate that will continue. Modinomics versus Manmohanomics. I think Siddharth has already delivered a bit of a verdict. He can deal with Mr. Chidambaram on another day for his response to that. But thank you all very much for joining us on our special coverage. Our budget coverage continues. Lots of special programming here on India Today, and of course, Business Today television as well. Thanks for watching. Stay well, stay safe. Bye for now.
When our government, under the visionary and dynamic leadership of Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi, assumed office in 2014, the country was facing enormous challenges. With Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas as its mantra, the government overcame those challenges in right earnest. Structural reform